Our guest on Perspectives today is Mark Winchell, and he is the Executive Director of the Ashtabula County Port Authority. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Bob. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Now, we've had the president of the Conneaut Port Authority on the program a few times, George Peterson, and we've learned from him that Port Authority does not mean just lakefront stuff, and it's the same with the county, correct?
That is correct, yeah. So it's the Ohio Revised Code splits basically. It's the old port authorities and new port authorities. So they were real creative when they named them in the ORC, and it's really called the front half and the back half. So the back half are the newer port authorities, and again, typically when I came to this industry, I heard the name Port Authority. You think it's a gun and a badge and a boat, and it's like a harbor master. All that is a big part of some port authorities. No, we're what we call a modern port authority, very similar to what Conneaut has. There are actually 3 port authorities in Ashtabula County.
Right.
There's one in Conneaut, one in Ashtabula City, and we're the county port authority.
So it was created in 1988. I did a little research here by the county commissioners. So how go ahead.
Oh, yeah, the county port authority was created in the 80s, and again, people ask all the time, how do you really put your finger on it? How do you define a port authority? And, the easiest way is to say we handle a lot of those gray area things. So we really play in that space between what private industry can't afford to do and government isn't allowed to do. So a perfect example is a brownfield site. That term has become kind of a buzz term here lately. We talk about brownfields, and that's a former industrial site that has some contamination on it. And those can range a lot of varying degrees. But if we talk about industrial development or commercial development, it's much more prudent for us as a community to rehab our former brownfield sites and put industrial sites there, rather than going out in the middle of a green space and putting an industrial site there. So a perfect example in our neck of the woods and where we operate a lot of our functioning is up near Plant C, which is the former Union Carbide facility up in Ashtabula Township. So, if we're going to put in more industry, we already have heavy water lines. We've got lots of power up there. We've got natural gas. We've got big industrial roadways that have thick concrete. So it's easier for us to clean up the contamination that was left there and put new industry in those locations instead of taking them out and putting it in the middle of a pier pond where then we have to run, more gas lines and more water lines and all of those things. So we really focus a lot of our efforts on brownfield redevelopment and specifically in the Ashtabula Township area because we have, like I said, the former Plant C, which was a former coal burning facility up there along Lake Erie.
Right. So does this mean like you may take an old gas station with rotting pipes or something and clean that up to develop it into an industry, something like that?
Certainly. There's another piece. So really, I can go through a list of all the different things we do. Another piece of what we do is brownfield redevelopment for gas stations. So we actually are part of we have a gas station program. It was actually the funding came from ODSA, which is a state organization, and their petroleum funds. And it allowed us to go in and acquire these abandoned and derelict gas stations. And then what we do is we go in and perform what they call phase 1, which is kind of your book report of what the environmental concerns might be. Then we go in and perform limited phase 2 work, which is installing ground monitoring wells, and we're actually removing some of those tanks that are out of the ground. And ultimately the plan is to then remove the structure and put that land into productive use. And this goes back to that initial statement, the government really, it's tough for them to get involved in those. And from a private industry standpoint, Bob, if you want to start a business and you say, man, there's a great corner lot there on 20, but there's an old gas station there, it would be cost prohibitive for you to have a business there because you're spending, $150,000 cleaning up the site. So that's where the Port Authority gets involved.
So I would rather just go to a site that doesn't have anything there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we can step into what they call the line of title. So we can step in and take control of the property without assuming the environmental liabilities. We can apply for the grant dollars. We can clean the site up and then put it back into productive use. And then, Bob, you can have your business right there, and it's a nice, clean site. So, yeah, we do that kind of work around the county and have had some really successful projects with that as well.
Is this relatively new? Because when you talk about that, I can remember when there were a lot of sites that you described. Nobody wants to buy them because they have leaking gasoline or whatever. And so they just sit there for year after year.
And that's true, Bob, and I'll be very honest with you. And as we look at the Route 20 corridor that stretches obviously from Pennsylvania, in our neck of the woods, from PA all the way across the county and obviously into Lake County and west and continues on east through PA. But the Route 20 corridor specifically, nearly every north and intersection along that east-west route had filling stations. You look at not all four corners, but in a lot of times on a couple of the corners at some point in time over the last 100 years, there's been a filling station. So the challenge with those sites is when, maybe the owner of that site had, they put a couple kids through college, they had a little convenience store. It was a very productive and very useful, revenue stream. Well, the problem is those filling stations go out of fashion. We have a lot more sheets and truck worlds and bigger filling stations.
And we've got I-90 and people aren't going down Route 20 to New York or California or whatever anymore.
Exactly. The modern consumer, the modern travel pattern is just different. So candidly, those sites become they abandoned, they become tax delinquent, and really it becomes not a viable site. So unfortunately, there's a lot of those along the 20 corridor, and really most throughout Midwest America, a lot of those heavily traveled routes that are now bypassed have a lot of those issues on them. So for us to have port authorities involved, again, the Conneaut Port Authority, the Ashtabula City Port Authority, our county port authority, everybody can play a role and do some of those projects. So it really depends on funding, what the missions are. Another thing with port authorities, because they have so much of a robust portfolio of what they can do, finding your lane and staying in is also a challenge because, we can all get involved in lots of stuff, but because there's so much we can do, unfortunately, you get dragged in different directions. So, I know that from our perspective at the county, we really look at providing living wage jobs as kind of that cornerstone. If we're going to hang our hat on something, how many living wage jobs are we going to create? So if we got involved, we could probably do 1,000 gas stations, but really they're not generating the kind of impact that we feel our ports should generate. So, all ports can kind of pick and choose the different programs they want to be involved in, and what's most impactful for their constituency and their residents. So that's the cool thing about Conneaut specifically is you have your own port authority. So they can focus on issues and projects that are most germane and most important to Conneaut. The same with Ashtabula City, and then from our perspective on the whole county broad.
So do you work closely with the Ashtabula and the Conneaut port authorities? Trade information?
Yeah, we do a little bit. We actually, so the Conneaut Port Authority has become much more robust recently. Your city manager has really empowered them to do some really cool projects.
Yeah.
You guys are really moving along very well. There hasn't been a project that we've worked specifically with Conneaut on in quite a while. We actually are working with the city of Conneaut on, we have another program. It's a U.S. EPA Brownfield grant, and that's actually that's a grant to do Phase 1 and Phase 2 work on industrial sites. So that project's not going through your city port authority, it's actually going through your city government. So we've worked with Conneaut in that perspective. We've looked at a couple of their financing projects that we just haven't been able to make happen. But, the opportunities are always there. Conversely, the city of Ashtabula Port Authority, we worked with them on a dredging project. They have it's called a 204 program that they had put in place. So we're looking at taking dredge material after that project. So really, I think there's a supportive role and a collaboration that all three of the ports can share. But again, if it's needed, we're there to support each other. And if it's not needed, again, all those ports can independently do the projects that are most important to their constituents.
So well, first of all, you worked with Growth Partnership. You were employed by them, correct?
No, I was actually at the County 503 Corporation.
Okay.
Right now, we're in the Economic Development Center, so I currently am the director of the Ashtabula County Port Authority. I was formerly the director of the Ashtabula County 503 Corporation, and then Growth Partnership is another entity. So all three of those organizations make up the Economic Development Center here at the county. So
does Growth Partnership ever go to you and say, hey, this company is looking to move somewhere, and with this site, is this something that we can do something with?
Absolutely. So Greg Myers and Cindy Raber over at Growth Partnership, they do a great job, and they do a lot of site selection. When we look at their focus, they're kind of the tip of the spear. So they're the ones that are out there meeting with the companies. They're the ones that are out there bird dogging the leads. They're the ones out there finding out, what the industry needs and what the companies need. And then really they report back to us and say, hey, listen, guys, we're working on 6 projects, but 2 of these projects have this issue. Is this something you can help with? So the great thing about the collaboration is, like I said, Greg, and I can roll a baseball and hit Greg's door here from my office. So the
right.
Nice thing is having us all in one building, and then we can pull Sarah in from the 503 and say, hey, listen, this company's working on this. Mark, why don't you look at maybe some brownfield stuff? Sarah, why don't you look at maybe some financing? Growth Partnership is looking at some incentives. So it really is is a great collaborative team here at the Development Center to help us work together, and the proximity of being in the same building makes it really advantageous. We can just, gather around the coffee machine and have a conversation, spitball ideas, put it up on a whiteboard. It really makes for a great collaborative approach.
So you guys can all discuss the viability of any kind of project.
Absolutely. And the thing is, there's certain elements in the development field that, you have to enter into NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements. So there's sensitive, deals that are going on all the time, and some of those details can be shared and some of them can't. So just having the proximity to each other and being able to just spitball ideas. If you see a trend or if you see something within the market that looks like it has an opportunity, just having us in that same space, it's great. We can pull up a couple of chairs in the conference room and really just kind of noodle through the ideas. It's a very collaborative, and I think the world of growth partnership with the 503, they're great partners, and really it's, like I said, I genuinely enjoy the fact that this is becoming what we would consider, the traditional one-stop. Somebody walks in the door, they need financing, we got it. They need incentives, we got it. They need legislative support, we got it. All of those things can happen, so it's a really, really good opportunity.
I would think one thing that would turn off an industry that can look at multiple places is you go someplace and say, we want to come here, we want to locate here, and the reply is, well, that's fine, you can talk to us about this, but then you got to go to this other building somewhere and talk to somebody, and then you have to go over here and do this and that. And it's like, maybe I'll just go to Lake County or something.
And it gets harder. Very candidly, it's hard to do. If we got to get a permit at this time, and we got to go over and get legislation at this time, and we got to get financing at this time. That's a great thing. And I really, again, we lean very heavily. Growth partnership is that tip of the spear. They really are holding the client's hand and the company's hand, moving them through those channels, bringing in the different partners when they're needed. There are our local representative and local liaison to Jobs Ohio, and the local conglomerate, which is Team Neo. So they're the partner that brings those resources to bear. So there's a great network of partnerships that are involved, and really being able to take that company by the hand and say, here's where you are today, here's where we want to see you in 18 months, and we'll help you get there. That's a great benefit to have.
Our guest is Mark Winchell, and he is the Executive Director of the Ashtabula County Port Authority. How has COVID impacted things?
COVID has not impacted the Port Authority specifically nearly as much as some other organizations and entities. So the Port Authority's main focus and function, there's lots of, I think I mentioned earlier, kind of staying in our lane. There's lots of areas we can get involved in, but our core focus is pumping raw water. So we have the former First Energy site, Plant C in Ashtabula Township, and it's permitted to pump 100 million gallons a day out of Lake Erie. Right now we pump about 37 million gallons a day, and we supply that to three industrial customers in the Ashtabula Township area, and those customers of ours are all what they consider, essential industries. So they're producing products that are required for, the country to kind of keep moving forward. So we haven't seen a huge impact, but again, that's very, very specific to that piece of our business. So we've recognized, obviously, massive, waves and ripples within the economy and lots of other sectors, but specific and germane to our core focus, which is delivering raw water, COVID has not had nearly the impact it has on some of the other industries.
I tell you, if you're going to be the executive director of something that deals with a lot of raw water, you're in the right place.
That's it. Well, that goes back to, really, we talk about industrial development. There is a reason that a lot of this industry was centered along Lake Erie. So, we've built, it's funny, I'd taken a class years ago when I was at the 503, and we had an instructor come in, and he actually came from Wyoming, and he was part of NDC, which is a nationally accredited association that brings in these instructors to teach, accredited classes. And he said, we actually took our classes in Cleveland. He's like, I love coming to Cleveland. I love coming to the Midwest. He said, you make stuff here. And it was so profound to me when he said that. I had never thought about it. He's like, you guys are smacking steel and making these great big things. He's like, if you live in Wyoming, he's like, you are a rancher or you work for the mineral companies. He's like, those are the two options.
Interesting perspective.
It's so interesting. We make so much here. If you've ever had an opportunity to travel around the county and see the companies, the amazing parts and the industry-specific things we make. The caps for the wind turbines. It's just really an amazing place that makes stuff.
The diversity.
Oh, it's incredible. And raw water is a huge piece of that. Raw processed water is a huge benefit to those industries because if you need raw water, you're not located in Arizona. mean, you just can't do it.
Or Las Vegas. We got to go, though. Mark Winchell, thank you very much for your time. Executive Director, Ashtabula County Port Authority. I'm Bob Lebzelder on Perspectives.